it was a real tough task, and he would ask me for the most absurd and impossible things.
And it was also interesting to see people, mistaking one for the other.
The orders are directly coming from the PMO office, not from any ministry. There's only one person who are looking after things.
Sometimes you have the most amazing people to work with, and it's a pleasure to work with them, and sometimes you have very bad bosses as well.
Do you feel that with the current government being there are some things that have changed in the bureaucracy? So see, like DC साहब जा रहे हैं, DM साहब जा रहे हैं, so we all have.
You see the outer trappings actually, but there's a lot of pressure there.
The Lal Batti culture.
First of all, love Sir Kush sir. It's utmost pleasure of AP podcast team to host you people at our own studio. Like, we really appreciate you guys coming here. Thank you so much for being with us, sir.
Our pleasure and privilege.
Thank you.
Like, when I see the journey that you both have undertaken, like whatever you have achieved so far, there are so many things that we can begin with, honestly. But I would really like to start the conversation with some basic starters. As in, sir, you both are twins. Like the viewers also who are listening to this, both of them are twins, and they happen to crack the exam almost in the same year, but there's 1 year difference which we can come to later on in the conversation.
Right.
So perhaps for the starting, sir, I would really like to know, like you both were twins, I'm so sorry, and then you served in one of the most elite career options that exist now in this country. Even now, like people are mad about that thing. They so want to get into that. So, sir, how was the thing when you do, like literally your blood relation is serving with you? How was that feeling, and how it evolved you so far? To both of you, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Aftab, we belong to a family of civil servants. My father was also an IAS officer, and my brother-in-law was also an IAS officer. So, growing up, we saw the kind of difference which this career option can make for the general welfare of the public, and we decided early enough, I think it was in class 5th or 6th, that this is the career option that we will choose to undertake later on in life. And being naturally competitive, both of us then started working towards this goal, and I think we were fortunate enough, both of us, to crack it in our first appearance.
Yeah. For you, sir?
So it was very interesting and exciting to have a twin in the service, and that too the same cadre. Mm-hmm. So we had each other's backs naturally, and it was also interesting to see people, mistaking one for the other. It happened all the time. Mm-hmm. So there were some very interesting incidents with regard to that.
Yeah, and also, when you are in such high profile career, and like you both are twins, like so there's already this big thing attached, that twin IAS officers serving, like you guys are registered in the Limca book. That's I would say that's the big thing that displays this thing. So with regards to that, how are things for you, or how were things for you when you were back there in civil services? Like now, back then you were in the limelight, and when it comes to now, you might be a little off the limelight. So how has been this paradigm change for both of you?
Well, Aftab, I'll let Love answer that question, he being the senior. Though I have some thoughts on that. Love.
Yes. Basically, it really depends on one's own personality, how you take the retirement. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I think neither of us had really a craze for power as such. Mm-hmm. So I think it was pretty seamless getting into retirement mode, and I think it has been a very interesting and exciting journey after retirement. Kush.
So basically, neither of us had that tunnel vision that we were completely involved in only official matters. We both had a number of other interests. We are both big time into tennis. We are tennis players for the last 49 years on practically a daily basis. Then we are fond of ghazals, we are fond of looking at movies, and immediately after retirement I took up this project. I wrote a book. It's called A to Z of the Civil Services. And basically I took each letter of the alphabet starting with A and wove a civil service story around it. So A is for Academy Zindabad, B is for bosses, P is for politicians, T is for twinship. I have recounted all those. And Z, yes, Z was the most difficult, but I managed. Z is zoo of the bureaucratic variety.
Oh, that's good use of words, honestly.
So you do find some strange creatures out there.
Would you like to elaborate on that thing, strange creatures, to both of you, like?
Okay, love.
Well, sometimes you have the most amazing people to work with, and it's a pleasure to work with them, and sometimes you have very bad bosses as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one has seen both sides of the coin, and I think Kush will elaborate on the variety which comes across.
Well, you see, as far as bosses are concerned, you have to take them, the good and the bad. You have to take both with a pinch of salt, in the sense that you can't allow yourself to be completely at their mercy. You have to forge your own path. But I do recall having a boss, and this I've related in the book. He was like a Rottweiler. It was a real tough task, and he would ask me for the most absurd and impossible things. And when I would gently tell him that it was out of bounds, then he would tell me that, are you an IAS officer or a babu? So that kind of pushback one has to give to these kind of bosses, and it all depends on your luck, whether you're able to escape unscathed, or whether you feel the full might of their fury.
What was your seniority level back then, sir, during this incident?
Oh, I was at a joint secretary level. I had put in about 20 years of service.
In the central government back then, you were?
Yes, this was in the central government.
So, like, you both, like, served in the central government, and you, like, sort of headed, like, if I'm pronouncing this right, secretary is the head of that particular ministry.
That's right.
How was the pressure back there when you are in the center?
Well, for instance, it differs from ministry to ministry and from department to department. So I was secretary in NACO, which is anti-AIDS. There it wasn't much, the workload wasn't much, but then I moved to secretary health, and that was very heavy pressure. That was a really heavy pressure job, and as soon as one finished with the pile of files, the next pile would arrive. So there was hardly any time to sit back and think. That was one drawback of that job, and it's really heavy pressure.
Yes, once I think the state government of UP mistakenly appointed me as secretary home.
The UP state government?
Yes, UP state government. I was secretary home. Now this is a 24/7 job, and the then chief minister had this knack of holding meetings at 1 o'clock at night at the Amosi VIP lounge. And his total focus was on transfers and postings. So we would go there with all of the heavy files, and we would come up with a transfer list by around 3 o'clock, and then he would order me to have it published and so on by around 9 o'clock. And as soon as I did that, there would be an uproar, and we would have another meeting at 1 o'clock the next night. So the whole thing was a completely terrible experience.
Mr. Akhilesh Yadav was back then the CM or somebody else?
No, this was a time when Mr. Ram Prakash Gupta was heading the ministry in UP. He was the CM at that time.
Okay. So the work pressure increases, you're saying, as the moment your hierarchy increases in this?
I wouldn't say that actually, Aftab, because there are certain jobs like which you get fairly early in your career. DM-ship, for instance. Now, DM-ship, again, I've got chapter on that in my book. And can you imagine, the DM of a district like Kutch, he is essentially operating in an area, if you compare it to European countries, only 28 out of 49 countries have an area larger than that. So one district in the country has such a huge area. And similarly, if you compare with the population, then Thane, only 20 out of 49 countries in Europe have a population larger than that. So you're operating, and you are at the helm of affairs. You are answerable to the government for anything that happens. So for good or for evil, you're impacting a huge population, and you can really do some things which are for the betterment of society there.
So I believe like district magistrate is one of the most toughest posts that you can have.
And most
in your
rewarding also. The most challenging and the most rewarding, I would say.
Rewarding as in
Rewarding in the sense that you get a lot of job satisfaction.
Uh,
Because
of direct impact.
yes, direct impact, plus you are responsible for so much there. You're responsible, as Kush said, you're responsible for every little thing that happens. You are answerable to the government. So you feel a sense of responsibility when you discharge that function there.
Yeah, that's I guess true if you guys are saying that. So we to see like DC साहब जा रहे हैं, DM साहब जा रहे हैं, so we all have.
You
grown
see
up
the
with
outer
that.
trappings actually. But
Mm,
there's
the-
a lot of pressure there.
The lal batti culture, but beyond that, as I said, you see, if your focus is on development, for instance, then you can really change the development scenario of the district by getting the staff involved, getting them educated as to what the various schemes are all about, and going into the nitty gritty of development by taking it to the people, getting their priorities, and then monitoring it very closely. I was able to, in fact, do this on a very macro scale while I was district magistrate Uttarkashi.
And so now moving towards the current paradigm, as in the bureaucracy that is evolving at this moment with the current government. If we talk about the northern belt, sir, which is predominantly dominated by the central government, so what do you feel has been the tilt of bureaucracies nowadays? Like various bureaucrats have seemed to be gone little extremist with their things. And there are other people who are taking some actions without some thinking, without giving some thinking to the actions they should have taken. So things like these are happening.
Can I take this question, love? Okay, so Aftab, I think you see, the bureaucracy doesn't operate in a vacuum, right? So, and as with society, you have people who are extraordinary, who are dedicated, who are focused only on the public good, and then you have others who have a nexus, and a nexus with all kinds of shady characters. So one really can't generalize. I know that IAS has become the favorite whipping boy. You know, they are held responsible for everything which is wrong in society. That's an extremist viewpoint. We can't really take that as the correct scenario. I would say that there are people who are working night and day and giving an excellent performance, and there are others who've sold their conscience and who are doing something at the bidding of their masters, political masters, business masters, or otherwise. So that's the microcosm which you have in society anyway.
Is basically, I agree with what Kush has said. You get a mixed bag and you have the bad apples. Unfortunately, the society tends to judge you. Society tends to judge you by the bad apples instead of the good work which the IAS does. So that is a bit of a bummer.
That's there, sir. But do you feel that with the current government being there are some things that have changed in the bureaucracy?
Actually, both of us retired in 2016, so I think, at least as far as I was concerned, I was in the state government at that time. So I wasn't privy to what's happening at the central government and basically been a little out of touch. Love was there, but he was,
I think I got out when things were really heating up, and now the feedback I get from my service mates is that there's a lot of work which is being done, and they're really 24/7, working 24/7 now.
As in, sir, heating up, what's that term?
Heating up in the sense that there's a lot of presentations which perhaps are taken at the highest level, which was not happening earlier. In fact, the present PM, he takes meetings with the secretaries and asks for feedback and for presentations. I think that has gone up a notch, definitely.
Okay, so earlier it used to be not that case.
Not that case.
Okay, so like earlier used to.
Earlier it was more at the level of the minister, but
Okay.
now since it's the PM's level, things are definitely, one notch higher, and people are more keener to impress and also to present their viewpoint.
But is that good or bad? Because then it's like the orders are directly coming from the PMO office, not from any ministry. There's only one person who are looking after things.
I think it has its plus and its minuses. Pluses and minuses are there with every system.
Mm-hmm.
So the plus is that there aren't too many centers of power.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the minus is that everything is too centralized. And for a country of our, diversity, sometimes that is a bit of a minus.
Any input, sir, you would like to give?
Well, I would imagine, you see, that you have to have that middle ground. And too tight a control over bureaucrats is also counterproductive. And the other extreme is, if you let them run free, then sometimes their vision can be at odds with the government's vision. So this is something which I think all governments strive, but the extent of their success is something which history will tell us in time to come.
Was UPA government good with bureaucrats, or the current government is good with bureaucrats?
I would say there's no real standard of what government is good with bureaucrats. You see, as I said, it's for the bureaucrats to come forward and work for the vision which has been given to them and to deliver on the ground. So to that extent, it's the responsibility of the bureaucrats rather than of the government of the day.
I think that's a bit of a loaded question, because each government will have some positives and will have some negatives with regard to the bureaucracy. And it is only after, I think, a passage of time that you can really evaluate the impact of that particular government on the bureaucracy. It's too early to begin that process of evaluation, I feel.
And now shifting again to people a bit here.
Okay.
I don't know how much of you guys are active on social media, but if we happen to go on social media, or in general, we see general news debates, what we see are that people are getting too much extremist nowadays with their beliefs. Whether let it be spiritual, let it be religious, let it be professional, and especially political. If somebody is taking a belief, they are taking it to next heights to implement it, and then sort of giving it the side of imposter syndrome, that I want to impose this on people. So what are your thoughts about this?
I feel that there has been polarization, no doubt about it. In practically every walk of life, there has been polarization. But I don't agree that people are forcing their beliefs, because you still have that liberty to adopt your own view. Kush?
So social media wasn't there in our time, and we are, I think, old style bureaucrats. We believed in being anonymous, we believed in being neutral, and we believed in letting our work speak for itself. These days what's happening is that people are very keen to project themselves on social media and to become superstars and to attract lakhs of followers, that kind of thing, and for that they are willing to go the extra step and come up with extreme views, as you said. And I think this is not something which is actually good for the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy works best when it is anonymous, neutral, and is able to give advice fearlessly. That's my view on bureaucracy.
But about people, so people being extremist, they are getting carried away by so-called content being provided by the political parties around them, or people of different cults around them.
I think that's a given the reach and scope of social media. That's bound to happen.
And sensationalizing everything is again something which social media strives on, because if something is presented which is bland and boring, it won't attract. Everything now is on TRPs and grabbing eyeballs. So I think that is something which should be eschewed by bureaucrats at least. I mean, the others are free. It's a free country, so you can do what you like. But bureaucrats should treat the straight and narrow path, go by rules and regulations, and do their best in that context.
And bureaucrats coming on social media and then becoming like famous celebrities. There are some bureaucrats who are literally getting endorsements out of social media. They are making separate money out of the followership they are having.
I think that's a strict no-no, but people do it all the time. I won't endorse it by any chance.
Yes, in fact, the conduct rules, I think, are lagging a little behind in this, because conduct rules were framed at a time when social media wasn't that active, or in fact wasn't active at all. And I think there should be definitely rules against this kind of money making.
And even some UPSC toppers who are just getting passed out of this exam or clearing this exam, if they just write UPSC and their AIR, they are getting huge amount of followership. There are people they are following them.
Also, they make a lot of money
Yeah, separate
from
money
the
by coaching institutes
institutes.
and all that stuff.
by endorsing certain coaching institutes.
Let me give you an interesting incident which happened way back in the 90s. No names here. The topper of a batch was being felicitated in his hometown, and he was being given a cash award of 5 lakhs. Now you can imagine of 5 lakhs in the 90s. And he was very proud of it. He carried a newspaper cutting and he went to the director's office and he says, I need 5 days leave. I have to go, I have to fly to this place, and this function will be held. The director told him, you do this and I will see that you are removed from the IAS.
That's something that's really, but that's not the case, I guess. Nowadays people are invited. Nowadays, like, they are willing to take your travel expenses and all that stuff, so that you can come in. If you're from another city, you have to come in. We'll pay for your travel, but giving us those insights. So, yeah.
Well, as things progress, there are some pluses and minuses, I guess.
But what do you feel about this, sir? As in, new people just getting in, they are not even part of civil services. They are mere just people who cleared the exam and they have to undergo training.
So this is crass commercialization of having topped or being in the top 20 or whatever. And I heard of one topper who made 50 lakhs between joining the service and the declaration of the results. So this is something which one should discourage, but it will happen. So even if one turns one's nose up at it, I think there's no way of stopping it.
Yes, things have progressed to a point. I think you see, if you have rules against this kind of thing, it'll happen in a clandestine fashion. So matters have gone to an extent in which each coaching center is in a desperate race to enroll as many candidates, aspirants as possible. And for that, they are willing to do any kind of activity which can fetch them that result. So once again, as Love said, it's commercialization on a grand scale. And I don't think anything can really check that trend.
I got a bit swayed away from the topic of government here. So
no, but after the point really is that the culture of the bureaucracy, right from the time you give the exam, it is set in motion from that time itself. So if you have that particular angle, that you start with a money making mindset, then the entire journey during your bureaucratic days will be colored by that mindset, and it will be a very, very sad day for the country when that happens, and it's happening actually.
And I think people are now clearing this exam just for the sake of the fame that is attached with it. When you hear that AIR dash, and now every coaching institute is inviting you. I think people are, especially of our age group, is doing this for that, I guess, not for the civil service stuff much.
So there was one candidate who preferred the IRS to the IAS.
Okay.
For very obvious reasons.
Oh, yeah, that's understandable. But is that true? Does that happen much?
It doesn't happen much. He was an outlier. But then you have all types, as we said.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting incident which has been narrated by Mrs. Vittal in a book. Mrs. Vittal, by the way, was the wife of former CVC, Mr. N. Vittal. She had gone to the academy and she met the topper. And the topper had come from an IIM and IIT background. So she said to him that, look, with that kind of a background, you could have earned any amount in the private sector. Why did you join the civil services? And he shot back, he says, ma'am, who told you that you can't earn in the civil services while working in the civil services?
But isn't that very explicit? Like, how did he say it? That's a very explicit
Exactly,
statement.
Mrs. Vittal was so taken aback. She's mentioned it in her book. She said, I was completely speechless that what exactly is going on now. I mean, she had of course seen it from the time of her husband, when even to mention corruption in the same breath as civil service was considered something which was completely wrong. But now I don't think matters are in a very good shape that way.
Is there something like good corruption and bad corruption?
No, I think corruption doesn't
Is
have any
corruption.
good attached to it. Corruption is corruption and it is bad. That is my take on it.
And also, sometimes one restricts it to monetary corruption, but that's not everything. You can be corrupt in many other ways. Integrity wise, you can give wrong advice based on what you feel that is politically acceptable. That is also corruption.
As in bureaucrats who are in positions giving political opinions, you were saying?
Yes, giving advice based on what is politically feasible instead of what is
Acceptable.
instead of what the rules and regulations are all about. I mean, that's the whole idea, that bureaucracy is actually a kind of system in which rules and regulations play a predominant part. You're supposed to conform and see that others conform to rules and regulations.
Yeah, so I was saying, like, I got swayed away from the topic. So the next thing that I wanted to ask about this current government was the biggest drawback and the biggest strong point about the current government which is ruling.
I think we should leave that to the current, service mates to answer that question. It's too loaded, and I wouldn't like to
You won't like to
approach
touch
it.
that part?
Yes. And
Yes, as I said, we as bureaucrats are completely neutral as far as political parties are concerned and governments are concerned. So, in our work environment, that is a factor which we put aside.
Okay, let's then rephrase this stuff. What is this government done in terms of building an atmosphere for good governance?
Once again, Aftab, I think anything related to politics would be outside our sphere, because firstly, as I said, our attitude to politics was something completely different. And we were both completely apolitical. So, and we haven't really been involved in the present day dispensation to be able to comment on that.
But was that factor a bit daunting for you in your journey as a bureaucrat? Because you tend to have many people, like one day you are having this politician, another day you are having another one.
So, Aftab, actually what happens is that, or would you like to take
No,
this?
you-
Okay. So, you develop your own strategies in coping with politicians because you have to deal with them for 3 decades, right? So I'll just talk about a particular incident which happened to me and which I have related in my book also. You see, when I was SDM in Pratapgarh, a particular post came up. It was a very insignificant post. It was in the sub-registrar's office. The potential for getting over-the-counter money was huge.
under the counter.
Under the counter, sorry. And there were 7 vacancies. And there were 7 political heavyweights in Pratapgarh. With the result that I got 7 slips from each one of them saying that you have to appoint X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. And I was looking at these slips and with a worried frown in my face one day, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" I said that, "Look, this is the situation and I'm just green behind the ears. The DM has entrusted me this responsibility and I'm being pressured by all these people. What should I do?" She says, "Give them to me, let me have a look." She took them and she tore them up. And she says, "You go with a free mind." And I went with a free mind. I conducted that examination, and you won't believe it, all 7 of those politicians congratulated me on a free and fair selection. And that gave me a footing. From that day onwards, I decided I will listen to my conscience and I will do the right thing and I will have a good night's sleep. So that stood me in good stead, because word also spreads. So word spread around that this is an officer who doesn't listen, no matter how high and mighty the politician might be, right? So you have to set, as I think Love had said some time back, you have to set a marker. You have to indicate that this is what is your style of functioning, come what may. And then I think the word spreads, your reputation spreads. You might be put in an insignificant posting, but then you take the rough with the smooth.
I'll give you another example. There was one cabinet minister in Uttar Pradesh who wanted me to empanel a contractor who was blacklisted. So I put my foot down because I knew that he would escape unscathed. He was not willing to give it in writing, obviously. He just kept on after me that you have to empanel, and I kept saying I cannot empanel because he is blacklisted. And ultimately I was shifted from that department, so I was fine with that. Naturally, you have to take that as part of your journey. But I didn't give in to him, and later he in fact became one of my ardent supporters. So even they recognize, the worth of a bureaucrat who is not willing to give in to unfair demands.
But that no that you say to people,
Yes.
isn't that a problem that is going to be there? Like no matter what you do, that's a problem, I guess, right?
It's you debate it in your mind and you feel that it's better than being behind bars, for instance. So you see the worth of a no. It has to be a very curt and precise no, right from the beginning, so that they are aware that they cannot push you beyond this particular, line which you have drawn for yourself.
I have a dimension on that, Aftab. You see, everything stems from one thing, whether you are ambitious or not. If you are ambitious, if you are vying for the top post all the time, if you are eyeing that post, and if you are willing to sacrifice your conscience, then you will walk that extra mile and be hand in glove with all kinds of criminally inclined people. But if you are clear in your mind that you are not going to be one of those who are in the race for the loaves and fishes of high office, then you can take a stand with a clear mind and tread the path of righteousness.
So like as in if we have to rise higher in hierarchy and the correct position, as in being heading a particular ministry, whether in state or whether in center, someone has to make some sacrifices for that.
I wouldn't say it happens 100% on the same lines. There are exceptions, but by and large, the people who jostle for the top positions, they barter their soul. Won't you say that, Love?
It happens to a number of people that they're willing to sacrifice and compromise on the ideals they had when they joined the service. And unfortunately, they are the ones who then become identified with the stars of the service. They become the stars of the service because people say that they can survive any government. But personally, I don't think that's the right way to approach.
Okay, even if one government is there and then if it's leaving, then another government who is coming in power, they will be knowing that these people are the good people.
Yes, people get associated with governments. That's the downside of it also.
And also
Of regimes rather.
Yeah, post service this is also happening. Like there are some bureaucrats or some even government officials, I would say, from other spectrums of government, who tend to support government via debates, via social media accounts and all that stuff.
But this happens with practically every government. You'll have the pros and the antis. And the pros are the ones who thrive and survive.
Yeah. And what's this theory like bureaucrats or some people who are senior or were senior in government, then getting positions like of governor, lieutenant governor, or some other senior most positions, which are basically a bit political and apolitical mix.
Well, I won't say anything about bureaucrats becoming ministers or whatever, because they have shown, some of them at least have shown a lot of effectiveness in that position. But definitely there was a time when a retired judge of the Supreme Court, he became a governor of a state. Now that is the kind of thing which I really frown at. because that is a very stark example of a quid pro quo.
Quid pro, as in, you could elaborate, sir. For
Quid
the general
pro, yeah, quid pro quo is that you are
Mhm.
pro-government in your rulings, and so the government rewards you with either a Raj Sabha seat or a governorship.
Mhm.
That is extremely doubtful kind of activity.
And there's another example of this kind of mindset at work, and that is when people get repeated extensions.
That's true.
That blocks the way for the other candidates who may be even worthy of selection, and sends an extremely wrong signal.
Many times, but if bureaucrats or diplomats are brought into power, as in politics, not in a very explicit way, not mass politics, but politics in execution ways, like Mr. Jaishankar was a diplomat and then he is the foreign affairs minister, and Mr. Ajit Doval also now is the NSA. So what are your thoughts about those particular things?
Well, there's a cooling off period which is prescribed for, that's 1 year. Earlier, what was happening was that people were jumping ship into the private sector, for instance. So now the government has at least provided for 1 year cooling off period, and after that, if a person wants to join politics, it's, I think, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that.
You see, it all depends. If someone has that expertise and that is recognized and then you're inducted, then one has no problem with that. But as Love had suggested, if there is a suspicion that you have been pro-government and you have been giving certain concessions to government, and on the back of that you're selected for some post, then that becomes controversial, and that is something which we should definitely steer clear of.
Okay. Shifting conversation bit towards your life, as in you two were related and sort of served in the same jurisdictions. So do you feel like when professional and personal lives are mixed, so it's a better governance, or it's completely the opposite of it?
I think governance doesn't have anything to do with your personal life as such, because it depends on the amount of professionalism you bring to the job and how well you have internalized certain values, which actually sanskar, what you call in Hindi. So I think that is very important, Aftab.
To the extent that both of us were in the same field, both of us could talk to each other and cross-fertilize each other's ideas. To that extent, I think it was really a plus point being a twin and working in the same area. I think it helped both of us to be better professionals in our field.
Better professionals, as in, sir?
Better professionals. For instance, Love was district magistrate in Chamoli and I was district magistrate in Uttarkashi. So
At the same time?
No, Love was senior again. He was there 2 years before I was. So he could pass on the value of his experiences to me, and I could then build on that as a foundation.
Okay, so like a advice, sort of like senior junior bro thing, as in I'll be leading, I have made these mistakes, you don't do that, sort of like that.
Not mistakes. In fact, I have done this for the people, and maybe you could consider whether it is something which you can do in your area as well. So that way.
Any one of those advice you remember till now which sir gave you back then?
Well, as a general rule, you see, serving in a hilly area, the main problem used to be one of connectivity. And the government used to provide at that point of time something like 40 lakhs. It was called untied funds. So this was something which Love had alerted me that connectivity is very crucial. And I used this untied fund in a lot of ways to see that the connectivity in the rural areas was improved.
Yeah. And any other philosophical advice that sir gave you via his senior service experience?
Not exactly philosophical, but more practical in the sense that you see, for instance, when I was in DM Uttarkashi, then my focus was on development as such, and Love had alerted me to the fact that these areas require a huge dose of development inputs. So then I took off on that and forged my own line of thinking by firstly getting all the staff together, assessing what their knowledge level was, then giving them objective tests so that their knowledge level would increase, then going on tours right into the interior with a questionnaire and seeing the actual implementation of schemes. So all kinds of, and I wrote a book on that which has been published by the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy.
Okay.
So that in fact helped me in a sense to develop my philosophy of administration.
And also reading one of your blogs, you had written that love, sir, is just the mirror image of you. So would you like to elaborate on that particular?
Oh yes, in fact there was a time when I got confused myself. So what happened was that both of us had gone to Imphal, where my sister and brother-in-law were located, and when we came back, this was by train at that time, flights weren't there, we took a cab and the side mirror was open. And I said to Love, Love, it looks like you haven't washed your face properly. There's a big blob of Colgate sitting on your nose. And then Love looks at me and he says, you are such a moron. You are looking at your reflection and giving me advice.
Your thoughts on this thing, sir?
It was always very interesting,
Yeah.
And my niece used to say, Dodo Papa. Kush's daughter.
Any interesting, or you would say any that incident that happened with you two regarding this twin thing in the bureaucratic circle? That one incident that you remember?
Oh yes, there's so many incidents. Again, I've recounted them in my book. Love, do you want to take up this?
Yeah, basically there was this meeting which was being held by the chief secretary, and when I went to attend it, he says, what are you doing here? You are in charge of this particular area which had nothing to do with that meeting.
Yeah.
Then I had to explain that, no sir, you are mistaking me for Kush.
Okay.
And there was this other incident. There was one gentleman who was Love's boss, and he used to pride himself. He said, I'll never make a mistake. I know who is Love and who is Kush. I'll never ever make a mistake. So Love and I took him up on that challenge, and Love briefed me. He says that, look, there is this particular matter which he wants me to discuss. So he briefed me on that matter, and I went with that file and I discussed it for a full 15 minutes. Then I said to him, sir, are you missing a trick? He says, what do you mean? So I said, sir, you've been talking to somebody who's not even connected with the subject. I'm Kush Verma, not Love. He was so taken aback. He says, what the heck? I thought that I had got both of you straightened out in my mind, but really you guys have pulled this off on me.
That's really amazing to hear, sir. Like very, I think you must be having very notorious stories related to this twin thing in your bureaucratic journey. Yeah.
Oh yes, and sometimes it would happen in not a very pleasant way. So there was this Deva Mela, and Deva Mela in Barabanki, very famous. So Love was posted in Hyderabad and he was in charge. And there was this, the wife of the DM was there, and she had just come into the picture. Her husband had joined as DM Barabanki. So she was there, and someone told her that is Love and his wife moving around. So she had a good look at Love and Sangeeta, his wife. And then the next day, I was in Pratapgarh close by. So Love phoned me up. He said, what are you doing? I said, nothing in particular. So he says, come over. This Deva Mela is going on. Come with Anu, my wife. So we went over. And then this DM's wife was there the next day also. She had a close look at me and my wife. And then later on, she told her husband, she says, Naresh Dayal was the name. Naresh, you were singing praises of Love. You were saying he's a role model, he's a man of integrity, this, that and the other. But I think you're completely wrong. I think he's a womanizer. So then Mr. Naresh Dayal had to clarify and get the ethics of the whole thing straight.
That's really a very notorious incident, I must say. Yeah. Now moving towards civil services exams part. so nowadays, like earlier, we were also discussing about how civil services has become a very lucrative career option for people who are looking for fame, but it has also become very tough. Each year, there's something that is very unpredictable. Well, UPSC has always been unpredictable, but now it's like you are preparing for economy, but they are going to ask you about sports, so you never know what's going to happen. So things like this is happening, and when you compare like with this other countries across the globe, the civil services is a very genuine job, and it's not the experience level and all that stuff, the difficulty level and all that stuff is not that much difficult in comparison with India. So what do you feel is this reason of this so much of difficulty, so much of pain, so much of hardship with this particular exam?
So one reason is that people are mad to give this exam, especially in the cow belt, the northern belt.
Yeah.
So you have people like to the tune of 5 lakhs giving it and only 1,000 making it in the final. So it's one of the toughest exams, and it has always been. But there have been attempts to make it, more of a level field. So earlier there were 2 subjects which you had to take for optionals. Now there's only 1. And now they're talking of making it equal for everybody, in the sense that there will be no special subject which you take. So there's been some kind of tinkering with the exam through the ages. And the attempt is to make it more level playing field.
But it should not be changed, you're saying. The curriculum of it should be like that. Like
I
the
feel
basic
that
curriculum.
that's a good ideal to work towards. And maybe it'll happen in the future. I hope it does.
So there was this Harvard professor, and he was addressing some civil service aspirants, and he says that I've had a look at the exam curriculum, and he says if you crack the civil services, then getting into Harvard University is like a walk in the park.
Oh, that's a very big flex.
Yes. So my take on this is that, you see, when we gave the exam, it was pre-Kothari Commission model, and in that the syllabus was manageable. In fact, if you set aside 1 year after your post-graduation and worked properly, then you could cover that syllabus to a very large extent and be confident that you would be able to give the answers in the right fashion. But now I think the syllabus has got kind of spun out of control. In fact, the director of the academy, when I was there, he used to say that if now you are able to master the civil services exam syllabus, then you have attained moksha. So, and when you have that kind of a syllabus, then it becomes a game of chance. Because obviously, if you have covered, you cannot cover the entire thing. You cover parts of it. If they come, if you are lucky enough and they figure in the questions, then you are able to make it, or otherwise not. Now, all across the world, what has happened is that they are doing, the civil services exams are being looked at as competency based exams rather than as knowledge based exams, and I think that's the way to go.
And also the current civil services pattern that we are having, do you feel it is making various good academicians instead of administrators? Do you feel that?
Not quite, because you see, the exam is one feature, but beyond that there's training and there's on the job experience also. So all that comes into the mix. But definitely what happens is that the exam part of it, that becomes something in which people are now taking recourse to coaching, they're taking recourse to rote learning, there are all kinds of unsavory features which are now getting associated with it.
And to all the dear aspirants watching this, like what could be your piece of advice, like with this much of toughness and this much of pressure that exists?
I feel there's no alternative to really studying hard. Tapasya is what is required, and trusting the rest to God, because there will always be an element of luck associated with this exam. So do your best, give it your best shot, and the amount of study it requires is humongous. So one must be prepared, mentally prepared to, and also to take failure in your stride. Like my niece, she gave it 4 times before she got the 11th position. So one should not be, dispirited by a loss, because it is, as you said, it has become very competitive and very difficult to get into the services.
My take on this would be that one should think in terms of one's own abilities, assess where one has reached in terms of, you give the exam once, twice, thrice, but always have a plan B. We sometimes find, for instance, I was interviewing someone who said that this was my 11th attempt. Now, 11th attempt, and then I said, what were you doing? He said, my brother is a doctor, so I was staying with him for these last 11 years and I was preparing. And that, now what, he's nothing but a parasite, right? He's depending, he doesn't even have that sense of, self-worth, that you're depending on your brother all this time, and you're not generating any income on your own, you're just fixated on this. You're wasting your energies time and again. So I feel that the system also needs to be rejigged. You give it 3 times and then after that, end of the thing. Close it. There's so many other avenues. Don't allow this to become just a money-making racket for coaching agencies. Allow people to express themselves in other ways as well.
That's your message to all the aspirants.
Yes.
And about the reading part, recalling part, and obviously you were also the part of the board of interview boards, right? In Vajiram Institute, I guess.
Yes, I've been interacting with a lot of civil service aspirants. What strikes me that these days the intake of aspirants is more or less is heavily tilted towards the engineering sector. With the result, and the people who come in, they are not exposed to the wider world. So they have been tunnel visioned into talking only about engineering, and that makes it very difficult for them to respond when you are asked questions about the general state of affairs in the country and abroad. Love has also been part of that.
I've been associated with some of these coaching mock interviews. But then ultimately it's down to your own talent. I remember there was this gentleman who, I asked him, how many mock interviews have you done? He said 26. And mine was the 27th, incidentally. But after that he got the 16th position in the All India.
All India rank.
Yeah, All India rank, he got the 16th rank. So he had it in him to do well. That self-confidence also has to be there. That even after, multiple mock interviews, you know what you have to say and how you have to express it.
Yeah. And now, summing up this conversation and moving towards the end of it, genuinely I was asking, figuring it out, what should I genuinely ask you people? But there's this one thing that I really want to know. After spending so much of time in bureaucracy and being there, knowing so many things, so many people, politicians, general people, good people, bad people, what would you pick out from your experience of bureaucracy that you would like to give to the general public?
I would say that it is one of the most satisfying options which exist in our country, at least. And basically, if you have the drive and you want to make a difference, then there's nothing like this job, because it has so many aspects to it. It has so much variety. That is something which is lacking in other fields,
But actually I was asking, sir, what you learned from the service that you want to give to others? That one thing that you really learned from this particular job?
Well, I learned to stick to my values, my sanskars, and not to compromise on them. And that itself will, build up your reputation, and basically people will recognize you for it. Long after you've gone also, people will recognize you for it.
I would suggest that what I learnt was that innovation is the key, and if the ultimate aim is public welfare, then what you need to do is to look at the system as it exists and rework it so that it becomes more efficient, so that it becomes more result oriented, and so that it gives more satisfaction to the general public in terms of public service delivery than what existed before. Because if you are there and you are there just to see that everything goes on at the same level, then you haven't contributed anything. But if you contribute in that sense, if you have that drive, if you have that imagination, if you have that focus, then what you do will definitely change the lives of the people for the better, and gives one immense satisfaction in the end.
So you're talking like people should take ownership about giving to society?
Yes, and bureaucrats are ideally positioned for that. You see, the way the progression is that initially you are put in positions SDM, city magistrate, DM, divisional commissioner, etc., where you have direct access to the people. So you are interacting with them one on one, you're coming to know of their problems, and you can do a lot of problem solving at that stage itself. And as you become senior, then you get to operate on the policy levels. Then you can give those inputs which shape policy, and that will have an impact on the national level. So no other, as Love said, no other career option in this country affords you such a huge potential for doing good for the general people. No other option. It's been immensely rewarding, immensely challenging, but immensely rewarding.
Yeah, I guess that was all from my side also. I really happen to enjoy this conversation, knowing so many things about bureaucracy, and obviously about your notorious incidents also as twins. So it was really very enriching to talk to you. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Oh, very much so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.